Shalom. This week we begin reading and studying the third book of the Torah, Sefer Vayikra, otherwise known as the book of Leviticus. Chumash Vayikra, literally the center of the Torah, with two books before it and two following, is indeed referred to by our sages as the heart of the Torah. It deals primarily with the korbanot, the offerings in the Holy Temple. Now, the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Purely from a literary perspective, from the standpoint of the storyline, everything has been leading up to this moment. On the simplest level of the timeline, having begun with creation, the creation of man, and the earliest struggling and wayward generations, the forefathers, and the formation of the nation of Israel, and the eternal covenant made with Abraham and renewed with each of the patriarchs, and the descent of Israel into Egypt and servitude there, and the nation's exodus and redemption, and ultimately standing at Mount Sinai, the revelation, the giving of the Torah, the golden calf, the building of the tabernacle, and now the purpose of the tabernacle, the purpose of everything, all of history until this point, the divine service. That's on the simple level of coming to this Sefer Vayikra now, literally, and he called. On a deeper level, it's all connected. As we've discussed many times, the location of the Holy Temple on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem is the secret location of the heart of the Garden of Eden, because everything that goes on there, the divine service, is all designed to be part of the rectification of the Garden of Eden, of what happened there, of man's role in creation. And here at this place, Abraham bound Isaac. Here Isaac later came to pray. Here Jacob dreamed and consecrated an altar. And it was Abraham who said about this place at the conclusion of the binding of Isaac, "On the mountain God will be seen." So indeed, this is the center, the heart of everything. But we've got a problem. What's up with these animal sacrifices? Who does that today? Very hard to understand what's going on in the book of Leviticus. This is not in the lexicon of modern man. It's not in his milieu, and it's absolutely out of his comfort zone. So we could accurately state that this book is an uncomfortable experience and reality for many people. There are many important authorities who explain that when the Holy Temple is rebuilt, we will indeed be returning to bringing offerings there. But there are also many Jewish people who explain it all away, who quote so many authorities' explanations proving this or that great authority is saying that there were reasons for the existence of the temple sacrifices in ancient times, but Judaism has evolved, and with an audible sigh of relief, they strongly opine, they share their opinions with us, their strong opinions, that, thank God, we won't be doing this again. It used to go like that, they say, but God, it can't be that he still wants that, no way. Phew, they say. But this position, this idea of an evolving Judaism and an archaic or outdated or somehow primitive system of temple offerings, this is also a problem. Because if we indeed believe that the Torah is eternal, that it is the manifestation of God's will, that it predates creation and is its secret and guide, the guide of creation, that it is unchanging and immutable, and will not be altered, as indeed we declare in the formula of Maimonides' 13 Principles of Faith, that this is it, this is the Torah. And that God doesn't change his mind. The mitzvot of the Torah are eternally binding, and the service of the temple designed to facilitate spiritual upheaval, leading to lasting change in the psyche of a person, that's still in our future. So I mentioned this audible sigh of relief on the part of the naysayers. Speaking of audible, this whole book of Vayikra, which means, and he calls, as the Torah's heart, it's the centerpiece, begins with something inaudible. Verse 1 of chapter 1 begins with the words, he called, to Moses, and God spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying. Now, grammatically, this would make more sense if it read, and God called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying. But it's broken up. And our sages teach that, like all the words in the Torah, these words are very specific. And he called. Who? What is that connected to? This calling of he, with the speaker's, meaning God's, identity hidden, this calling to Moshe, this preceded the instructions that Moshe was to give over to the children of Israel. This calling was a very quiet thing. It was a very unique and personal calling with this still small voice that Moshe, with his total lack of self-importance and his total non-existent ego, he was able to hear it. Not everyone is prepared to hear it, this particular piece of knowledge, of perspective. Who wants to hear it? Whatever it is that precedes the book of Leviticus, that calling, that quiet voice that not everyone can hear, that serves as a fitting introduction to this topic, to these instructions, and to this book, already indicating to us that we need proficiency in like a different language in order to be able to access, to process, to grasp what is about to be unfolded. Now here's the key, the giveaway, the tell, as it were. We read here, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, Adam, when a man among you brings an offering to Hashem from animals, from the cattle, or from the flock, shall you bring your offering? Adam, this is all about being a man. The korbanot, I insist upon translating the korbanot as offerings, since the word sacrifice is a horrible mistranslation, because korban comes from karev, which means to draw near, not to sacrifice. The process of what we go through in the Holy Temple is not about giving something up or suffering deprivation. And these offerings, they're not for God's benefit. We're not doing God any favors about Adam. They are for his purpose, but they are for man's benefit, to help him become a human being again. See, we have to be in a completely different place in our minds to even attempt to comprehend this, because we are so disconnected from everything that we are going to be learning about here that sometimes we seem to feel that the best that we can do is just apologize and move on, and this nuclear disconnect, this distorted image on this whole subject is the result of attempting to plug these ideas, the Torah's mitzvot of korbanot, into some sort of, pardon me, pagan, heathen mindset that we have all inherited by osmosis. We've been given this for so long. We've been without the Holy Temple for so long, and we've been raised in a vacuum. No, worse than a vacuum. We've been exposed to and influenced by this paganity, and we're thinking that this whole thing of what's going on here, God's instructions to us about the offerings, is so totally foreign to us, because we don't even have the skill set, the alphabet, to imagine living life on the level that this brings us to. And what is that level? Sensitivity. Yes, the sensitivity to life. It's like a different language. It's like listening to something underwater, or like listening to something from a far off room when we encounter these verses, or it's like watching a movie somebody else is watching and you don't have the headset on, so you're watching it without the sound. Because attempting to relate these concepts to anything else that we can assume is a benchmark, it absolutely doesn't work. Because these korbanot have absolutely nothing to do with the pagan mindset. And what do I mean by that? Right? The way people look at this is, okay, I live in fear. human condition, right? To be alive. Very, very frightening. I'm vulnerable. I'm at the mercy of cruel, malicious, malignant forces which I need to mollify, to appease, to satiate with the death of others in order for me to gain life. In short, the idea of an idolatrous offering is like, in order for me to get what I want, in order for me to get that power to care for me or to sustain me or to protect me, I need to get on his good side. I need to buy him off. But this isn't it, see, because God is not interested in the death of the animal. That's not the point here. God is interested in the rebirth, the reemergence of man. The secret of the sweet savor, and this is one of the most beautiful ideas about the korbanot, we're told about some of the offerings that it's a sweet savor unto the Lord. This sweet savor is God sensing, because of the tremendous psychological drama that's going on within the person who is going through this experience of bringing the offering. God senses this person is becoming a man again because there was some confusion about the animal side. This whole concept, everything that goes on in the Holy Temple, is designed for a human being to regain the divine image, to reclaim the divine image in which he was created but has lost. The Sefer Vayikra, this book of the calling, is the manual, the guide to achieving more than just spiritual balance, but to strive for perfection in the image of man in which we were created. To ever strive to ascend, to merit the divine image that we were created in, to be worthy of being called a man, and to live, and here's something that is foreign to the world today, to live in constant awe, deep recognition and appreciation of the sanctity of life. This powerful, visceral, and transformative experience of bringing a korban to the altar emphasizes to a man his own preciousness in the eyes of the Creator and reminds him of what he is able to accomplish, what he could accomplish with his life. Hope, sensitivity. And now, here's just the most unbelievable thing about the book of Vayikra. And who notices this, right? Open up your heart in the deepest way. You know, the only way we understand God, the only way we have any comprehension whatsoever of who he is, since he has no end and no form, is absolute truth. The only way we understand him is through the identities that he uses to express his existence to us throughout the Torah. And the only name that God refers to himself with, throughout, from the first page to the last, the entire book of Leviticus, the name is the name of Hashem, Yud He and Vav and He, the ultimate name that consistently and exclusively conveys mercy and love. And every reference to the offerings, this is the name that is used and not the name Elohim, the name God, which, as everyone knows, conveys the attribute of strict justice. This whole idea of that name being used to convey God's identity in relation to his commandments of the korbanot, this itself precludes any attempt to degrade this truth of the Torah by comparing it or trying to plug it into any preconceived notion of animal sacrifices, because he doesn't want to be associated here with justice. This isn't an issue of justice or law. He doesn't want it in that context, because this is not about a reparation or a payment to some bloodthirsty deity accepting the death of an animal for the forfeited life of a human being. This is the God of love, who grants new life and a fresh future to man. This isn't about killing animals, who are, by the way, if you'll pardon me, not man's equal. This is about a man taking hold of his life, the restoration of a man's life and his spiritual and moral resurrection, re-entering the orbit of his life on a higher and purer level. It's all designed from man and totally about man. So, back in 1848, William A. Alcott writes the words, "The world is a mighty slaughterhouse." Here's what he wrote about his world back then in 1848, and I quote, "In this view, the world, I mean our own portion of it, sometimes seems to me like one mighty slaughterhouse, one grand school for the suppression of every kind and tender and brotherly feeling, one grand process of education to the entire destitution of all moral principle, one vast scene of destruction to all moral sensibility, and all sympathy with the woes of those around us. Is it not so?" I think that's back in 1848. This world has become more of a mighty slaughterhouse than ever before, more violent, more filled with rage, more filled with selfishness, moral decay, exploitation and cruelty and inhumanity than ever before. And lots of people are concerned about cruelty to animals, but they're remarkably silent, the same types, when it comes to man's inhumanity to man, which on a global scale has become a lot more institutionalized than it was the days of Mr. Alcott. The Holy Temple and everything about the offerings is the place where we yearn and learn about the sanctity of life, where we're challenged to rise above the senseless and selfish killing of animals and worse, of our fellow man. So we're going to be learning throughout this book about all these animals that are brought upon various occasions, every one of them brought as an offering, and every detail of their requirements and preparation represents a different aspect of human potential, and every organ of every animal another aspect of human personality. The effect on a thinking person who goes through this with understanding, the effect is staggering. It's like, wake up and live your life. And there are different types of offerings. There's the majority of the offerings, like the burnt offering, the meal offering, the peace offering, the daily, holiday, communal offerings. These are all expressions of hakrava, of dedication, of a person wanting to show that he wants to separate from himself the chaff, the meaninglessness of his existence and get closer to God. Of course, on the simplest level of all, this is the eternal commandment of God. And when it comes to a sin offering, because a lot of people think, oh, you've got to have the sin offering to get right with God. Chapter 4 and verse 2 tells us when a person sins unintentionally from among all the commandments of Hashem that may not be done, and he commits one of them. And this is an amazing thing, and of course very few of the offerings that are brought are actually sin offerings, but this offering can only be brought for an unintentional sin, because it's concerned with rectifying the spiritual damage that was done. And this connects to the idea that from an unintentional action, a person can come to disregard and move on to being intentional. But there's no offering that can be brought for a willful sin. A person through his deeds can reach a higher level of attempting to complete himself, to perfect himself. But the illumination of a person's soul can be diminished through what's called sin. And this language of techateh, to sin, is actually an expression of diminishment. And God gave us this ability to recognize a process is going on within us and to try and rectify the far-flung corners of our consciousness and never to lose our focus on our purpose in this world. Now, if all of this is a bit much for you over the next few weeks, as we'll be reading the book of Leviticus, remember there's a lot of other things that are going on in the Holy Temple. And after all, it is the house of prayer for all nations. Again, Adam, man, collectively. But as we approach this study, let's attempt to attune our ears to those words of Vayikra el Moshe. He called to Moshe. Because that calling can only be sensed by one who is willing to accept that there's an intelligence, a design, and indeed a compassion and a love that's greater than our own. And this sweet savor to Hashem, this pleasing aroma, is man's calling to reach that level. Man's challenge, his task to rise above his own base animal instinct and nature and to become a man. And that's the challenge. That's the legacy and the promise of the Holy Temple in a world that is more of a slaughterhouse than ever before, in a world whose legacy seems to be nothing but insensitivity. Here we're told, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when a man among you. And this is God's entire purpose, to bring us to the point where we're able to truly, once again, become a man.